became the Oregonian's writing coach, I used the skills I'd developed during a dozen years as a full-time university professor to teach narrative theory to the rest of the Oregonian's writers and editors. They were stunningly successful at putting theory into practice. Oregonian narratives won national awards for stories on religion, business, music, crime, sports, and just about any other subject you can imagine. Rich Reed worked with me on an international business story that won a Pulitzer Prize for explanatory journalism. Tom Holman and I joined forces again on a story that won a Pulitzer for feature writing. Michelle Roberts worked with me on a narrative submitted as part of a package that won the Pulitzer for breaking news. Rich Reed and Julie Sullivan, another writer who worked with me one-on-one for years, served as part of an Amanda Bennett team that won the 2001 Pulitzer Gold Medal, the highest honor in American journalism. I remained the writing coach even after I became a managing editor. As the logical spokesman for the paper's writing program, I appeared at national conventions for everybody from newspaper editors and journalism professors to food writers, investigative reporters, travel writers, wine writers, and garden writers. I wrote a column for Editor and Publisher magazine and produced a monthly instructional newsletter that circulated nationwide. I continued to teach occasional university classes on writing, and each year my focus shifted more toward nonfiction narrative. Every speech, workshop, class, and article forced me to think more deeply about what attracted readers to true stories about real people. But my most valuable education came from working with scores of writers on hundreds of stories. Producing for publication, often on tight deadline, gave me a practical grounding in story that the world's best graduate school couldn't possibly match. When I finally retired, I figured it was time to pass along the most useful lessons I'd learned. Storycraft is the result. I hope you'll find that it's a practical book. I've filled it with examples taken from my work with writers who wanted help, not literary hair-splitting. Helping with their reporting, help with their selection of scenes, help with their descriptions of characters, and help with their choices about what to include and what to leave out. They also wanted to know their options. The classic narrative arc you learn in college fiction classes is only the tip of the tail, and you won't find a particularly full menu of narrative nonfiction forms in the existing technique books, which tend to focus on one variety or another. So I've included guides to a smorgasbord of reported nonfiction types. We use them all at the Oregonian, including explanatory narratives, vignettes, and magazine forms such as narrative essays, both personal and topical. Mastering a wide variety of narrative forms is one key to success. Another is learning enough about story theory to avoid the fatal error of forcing narrative onto inappropriate material. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of classic storytelling, but experience has taught me that most subjects are best suited to simple informational writing that makes the key point quickly. There's a reason sports writers start game stories by telling us the final score. And if your neighbors want to know if their school will be closed, you'd be foolish to begin a report on the critical school board meeting with a long narrative wind-up. In keeping with the emphasis on practical application, virtually all of my Storycraft examples are from published work, and many of them are from stories I had a hand in bringing to publication. Storycraft also includes the editor's perspective. Most books on narrative technique ignore editors, and nonfiction narrative editing is included in only a very few educational programs. But I've seen narrative thrive only when writers teamed up with editors such as Neville Green at the St. Petersburg Times, Jan Winburn at the Atlanta Constitution, and Stuart Warner at the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Editing plays a critical role in great magazines and book narrative, too. Harold Ross and William Shawn built the ongoing nonfiction.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.